class. I'm going to be discussing the Bible and various allusions you can find in the Bible, as you probably could tell. So, the basics. The Bible is divided into two sections: the Old Testament, or as it's known in the Jewish community, the Torah, and the New Testament, which is the Gospels and Epistles of Jesus Christ. These are all the books in the Old Testament. You can see there are a lot of them. Here are all the books in the New Testament. There are less of them, but there are still a lot. You must know what happens in everything. Kidding, you only need to know a few things. So, Genesis is a pretty important book of the Bible. It is the first book in the Old Testament, and it contains lots of lovely allusions that we have discussed many times before in class, such as the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, the serpent, the tree of life, Cain and Abel, the flood, and Noah's Ark. Pretty sure you know what all those are. If you don't know, ask the other people in my group. So, also in Genesis, there is the Tower of Babel, Abraham and Isaac, Jacob and Esau, Sodom and Gomorrah, and Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which is actually called the Coat of Many Colors by most people, but I like the term amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. These ones are less known. I don't think we've discussed them in class very much. So basically the Tower of Babel, that's the story of when people tried to build a tower up to God, but God was very angry about that, so he smashed the tower and made all the people speak many languages. So that's where you get terms like Babel fish from either the website or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because many languages. And that's a picture of the tower right there. So, Abraham and Isaac. Abraham is the definitive archetype of the patriarch and was ordered to sacrifice his son Isaac, but in Islam, there are many traditions that say that it was actually his son Ishmael who was supposed to be sacrificed. Also, in case you didn't know, at the end God stepped in and was like, hey, you don't have to sacrifice your son, you've proven your devotion, so yay. Jacob and Esau. These were two, I've never heard of Esau before, but it was in the list I found, so I figured I should mention it. They were the twin sons of Rebekah. Esau was older and sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. And Jacob tried to steal Esau's birthright, and both those events made God pretty angry, but Jacob and Esau ended up making up, and they became the fathers of many nations. Sodom and Gomorrah, those were cities of debauchery that were destroyed by God, despite the protests of Lot. And Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors. Joseph was the son of Jacob, and he was the favorite son of Jacob, and that made all the other sons of Jacob jealous. So they sold Joseph into slavery and smeared his coat with animal blood. And this sparked, and because Joseph was sold into slavery, that sparked the movement of the Hebrews into Egypt, where they were enslaved for a very long time, until the book of Exodus, where Moses showed up. And he led the Jews out of Egypt, and God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. So Exodus starts with the baby in the basket, which was Moses. I'm sure you've heard of that before. There's also the burning bush, which you can see in that lovely ancient mosaic right there. Basically, God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. Later on in Exodus, there were the 10 plagues of Egypt because, God sent the 10 plagues to Egypt as punishment for the enslavement of the Jews. Passover began during the last plague, because the Jews would smeared lamb blood on their doors so that the angel of death would pass over their home and not take their firstborn child. So anyway, 10 plagues, there's water turning to blood, there are frogs and bugs and wild animals, and pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and the death of firstborns, obviously, so those might pop up somewhere. They're pretty big. Anyway, after the 10 plagues, the Pharaoh let the Jews out of Egypt, and they began their long trek back to the Holy Land. This trek included the parting of the seas, which you can see right there with Moses just parting the water for the Jews. Then there are the 10 Commandments. I'm sure you've heard of those before. I won't need to explain those. These are just some highlights from other books in the Old Testament. The term the Promised Land is a term for the land promised to Abraham and his descendants. just so you know. Another important story is Samson and Delilah from the book of Judges. Samson was a powerful man, and Delilah cut his hair, which cut off his power, so that was unfortunate. There's a story of Saul from Samuel. Saul was a peasant who became the king of Israel. There's the story of David and Goliath right there, with little David defeating the evil giant Goliath with only a slingshot. Although right there it looks like he has a sword. Yes, and then there's also Absalom's rebellion. And Absalom tried to seize power from David. A different David than that one. This is a King David. Might be the same David. I'm sorry, I don't know. Ask people who would know things in this class. Anyway, Absalom tried to seize power, but he failed. And he was killed by Joab. Then there's Solomon in the temple from the Book of Kings. Solomon was the son of David, and he built a temple. It took 7 years, and it was a fantastic temple, and Solomon was just a great king. So if you're ever reading things and they make allusions to great kings, they'll probably mention Solomon. More stuff in the Old Testament. So there's this thing called the mantle of leadership from the first book of Kings, where Elijah passed down his cloak, the mantle, which is a symbol of his authority, to his younger brother Elisha. There's also the prophet Isaiah from the book of Isaiah, who foretold the birth of Jesus, or the birth of the Messiah. Right in this picture right here, I have the story of Daniel in the lion's den depicted. He's very scared in this one. As you can see, Daniel was an innocent man who was sent to the lion's den, but he was saved by the protection of an angel. So awesome. There's also a term called the writing on the wall, which originated from the book of Daniel. So now let's go on to the New Testament. The New Testament is divided into the three different sections: the Gospels, or the Acts of the Apostles, which tell the life of Jesus from his birth they discuss his birth, his teachings, his trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. And basically all the Gospels tell the same story, but with different perspectives and different emphases, sometimes a few different details and omissions. For example, the book of Matthew has a stronger focus on Jesus, on the birth of Jesus, than, say, the book of John. Then there are the epistles, which are letters written to the church and mark the correspondence between the early churches, especially in regards to Paul. Then there is the book of Revelation, which is all about the apocalypse, so lots of fun. Anyway, some fun things you can find in the New Testament. In the Gospels, it discusses the nativity of Jesus. If you don't know much about that story, then go watch A Christmas Pageant. John the Baptist, who is the cousin of Jesus, and pointed him out as the Messiah, so he's pretty important. Then there's Herod, who is the king, and had been foretold that he was going to be overthrown by a person born in Bethlehem, which of course was Jesus, and so he killed all the innocents, slaughtered the innocents. That's a pretty big thing. Then there are the disciples, who are the 12 followers of Jesus. Then there's a man named Doubting Thomas, who is a skeptic who demanded to feel Jesus' wounds before believing him. So I don't know if you're reading anything about skeptics, you might find some reference to Doubting Thomas. Then there is the Sermon on the Mount, which is depicted in this painting right here, which is a very important sermon from Jesus, which is described in the Gospel of Matthew, and which basically describes Christian living. So the miracles of Jesus, these are very likely to be alluded to in many things, I assume. So the miracles of Jesus, he turned water into wine, he walked on water, as depicted right here, he calmed the seas. He fed the multitude by taking just a few loaves of bread and feeding it to thousands of people. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and he cured the blind. Well, he cured a blind man named Saul, who later became Paul the Apostle. So that was pretty cool. Last days of Jesus. There's the Last Supper, which is depicted right here. From that supper, you get the act of communion with the bread being the body of Jesus and the wine being the blood of Jesus. There was also the betrayal of Judas, who basically sealed Jesus' fate with a kiss, because he formed this deal with the Romans that he would kiss the man who the Romans were to execute. There is also, in the denial is the denial of Peter, I believe. Pretty sure it's Peter. Ask somebody who knows more things about this in class, because I'm not sure. Whoever it was, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times, and that was really bad, and Jesus foresaw his betrayal and denial. Then there was the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. So I'm sure you all know about that. Okay, so last days of the world, or in other words, the book of Revelation. So the book of Revelation was a mystical vision recorded by John. If we're told many things about the end of the world, such as the 4 horsemen who are right here, who will come in on a black horse, red horse, white horse, and pale horse. And the pale horse is normally either like gray or green or yellow. People can't decide what it really looks like. It also discusses the Antichrist and the beast and the whore of Babylon, and they're just false prophets and workers of the devil. Probably be referenced in apocalyptic literature. All of this will be referenced in apocalyptic literature. Also, in the book of Revelation, there is a rapture where all the innocents are taken up to God and everybody else is left to die. So, this has gone on for a very long time. Have a lovely rest of the class.